I'm Paul Floyd, a military analyst here at Stratfor, and today I'm joined by Omar Lamrani, also a military analyst here at Stratfor, and today we're going to focus on Ukraine and the most recent updates on the battlefield. So, Omar, the most recent friction point, if you will, in eastern Ukraine, the battlefield has been the aid convoy being supplied by Russia to supposedly the civilians and the rebels caught in this conflict in the east. And Ukraine specifically is really trying to frame that this aid convoy is some kind of subterfuge for some kind of tactical resupply or some kind of, ability for Russia to basically stage an intervention in some kind of capacity. Now, could you speak to that, please?
Well, Paul, I don't think this convoy itself is delivering weapons to the rebels. Keep in mind that this convoy is under intense scrutiny from both government agencies as well as non-government organizations. And furthermore, the Russians are already delivering weapons to the rebels through alternative routes. A large part of the border is under control of rebels, not under control of the Ukrainian troops. And through that, they've been delivering equipment in the past. Right.
So is there any way that you could see that this convoy could give them an additional supply capacity?
Well, in a sense, bringing goods into Ukraine could help out by distributing goods to the population that's sympathetic to the rebels. But then we come into other different obstacles, such as how they get there, Ukraine blocking positions, etc.
Right. So it may be influencing hearts and minds to a certain degree, but not necessarily shifting tactical balances per se. And I'd also kind of just add that maybe the potential friction between Ukrainian forces on the ground and this convoy coming into the rebel-held areas, if they bump into each other, you could spark some kind of broader incident.
It's good, indeed. And we need to keep an eye out on that. It could give an excuse for Russia to involve itself even more in the crisis. We'll see how that progresses as we see the convoy go in.
So if this convoy isn't necessarily a direct tactical resupply to these rebels, what is Russia doing to supply the rebels, and what are they supplying them with?
We've seen everything from small arms to heavy weapons, including armored vehicles, artillery systems. We've seen a lot of air defense weaponry, and not only the Buk missile that's allegedly was used to bring down MH17, but also man-pads, man-portable air defense systems that have been quite effective at negating the Ukrainian air superiority, particularly low-flying aircraft. We've also seen Russian equipment itself behind the border supporting the rebel thrust. So we've seen the reports of rocket artillery, tube artillery being used against Ukrainian forces. So they've certainly done a lot beyond what this convoy is allegedly going to do.
And over the last month, we've actually seen, a lot of the anti-terrorist operation in the Ukrainian military side make a lot of gains on the ground. How has that resupply Russian support? Has it changed anything? Is it helping? How would you frame that?
I think it's certainly helped in terms of keeping ammunition supply going, keeping the rebels' ability to fight there. But I mean, going to the Ukrainian offensive, I think that has, over the last month or so especially, driven the rebels quite under pressure. They've cut a lot of the supply lines into Donetsk and Luhansk, and it's really been quite successful in many ways, especially how they penetrate deep into the rebel lines. However, on the other hand, we've also seen significant casualties in the Ukrainian forces' ranks, and that's unlikely to diminish, especially as they go into urban terrains and ambushes are staged, etc.
And that's one thing we have not seen the Ukrainian military really do yet, is really that serious urban combat to try and root out rebels that are buried deep in these large urban population centers.
Yes, in fact, if you look at the population demography of eastern Ukraine, you will find that the countryside is rather sparsely populated, but there's intense population networks within cities like Luhansk and Donetsk. And obviously the Ukrainians are very concerned about collateral damage as they hit civilian population centers, as well as the difficulties inherent in urban fighting for their own forces.
So this conflict is far from over in the sense of just because of the territorial gains, it doesn't necessarily translate directly to immediate Ukrainian victory. That being said, as this conflict has been drawn out and protracted, one of the concerns historically in this region has always been the ground conditions based off the weather in this time of year, specifically the mud season and the onset of winter, which can really affect operations.
Well, certainly, Paul. In World War II, we saw this greatly affect the courses of battles, as what is known in the region as Rasputitsa affects the mud, and the conditions on roads deteriorate greatly. Then the onset of the winter, in which the temperature drops dramatically, that freezes the lubricants and obviously affects the troops. Now, this is a great concern for the combatants in the region. They have to plan ahead for this, but it won't negate completely the operations. What it will do is relegate them more towards the road infrastructure, which in comparison to the past is greatly developed. So it is less of a mitigating factor, but it's something that they will have to consider, especially in offensive operations as well as resupply. And we have to keep in mind that this does affect both sides.
Exactly. And I think that's a great point. And in some ways, it's equal to both sides. So in a certain way, the lighter side, or the side that's traveling lighter and has prepositioned supplies in a more forward positioning, probably has an advantage to a certain degree.
I would definitely say so, especially if you're talking about transporting large quantities of supplies.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Omar. That was very interesting. For more information on this subject or anything else, please visit stratfor.com.